Hello everyone, my name is Jim Garrity and welcome to this video all about pocket hole fixings and the pocket hole jig. I've bought this jig from Axminster Tours. I'm going to be showing you what's in the box, how to set up the jig and how to use the jig. I'll go over the good and bad points that I've found about pocket hole fixings since I've been using them. But first, what is a pocket hole fixing?
Here we have two pieces of 17mm plywood. Now if we want to hold them together at 90 degrees here, we could use a bracket on the inside and screw through here. We could use a bracket on the outside, screw through here. We could drill and countersink this top piece with a screw to go through and secure it to the second piece here. There's another way we can attach these two together, and that's by using a pocket hole screw. Now, these two pieces of wood are held together with a pocket hole screw, and you can see down at that hole there, the head of a screw. The hole is drilled at a special angle, and that angle enables the screw to screw through into this top piece of wood. Now, to do this, things have to be drilled in the correct place, and that's what I'm going to show in a moment. Now, what do you get in the kit? Let me show you. I'll open up the box, and there is a box of screws. There are two drilling jigs here. There is a drill, and this is a special drill, and we'll go through all of these items in a moment. Here is a T20 Torx driver, which fits the head of the screws in here, and the last thing is a small Allen key, and the Allen key is used to adjust the stop on the drill. Now let's look at these items one at a time. This is one of the screws that come with the kit in that box there. It's standard wood screw at this end. There's a swaged head, and that head also contains a washer. It's not actually a separate washer, it's one that's swaged along with the head. The socket in the top of the head is a T20 Torx, and that is the screw. There are plenty of other lengths, going right up to 50 or so, 50mm or so in length. They're all purchased separately. This is the bit that comes with the kit. We have a Torx T20 at this end. This is a hex shaft, and it's a standard 1/4 inch across flat, so that will fit into a standard 1/4 inch driver or an extension if you wanted to extend it. This is a drill, and straight away you can see that it's a special drill. It drills two holes, or in fact it drills one hole at 4mm, and then there's a step, and this larger piece of the drill counterbores the first hole to 10mm, and that takes the diameter of the head, that washer that you saw on the swaged head of the screw. So this goes down the jig and drills a small hole and then a bigger hole, which is the counterbore. At this end there is a stop, and that stop is adjustable depending on the thickness of the material that you're going through. I'll show you how to set this up a little later. There are two jigs within the kit. They're on this side. Now the jigs need to be attached to the wood, or held to the wood in the appropriate position to get the hole in the right position. I'll show you the setup of this a little later. This is just to show you what the jig looks like. This silver dot here is actually a magnet, and that will hold the jig to the clamp, and that makes it easier to use. The drill is placed down this end. You can see there's a little bush here which takes the drill. These two jigs can be slid together. They have a feature on the side, and you just simply push them together. Simply, there we go, like that. And now when you clamp those to the wood in the appropriate position, you can now drill two holes, ding ding, nice and close to each other. The last item in the box is this little hex key, little Allen key, and that is used for loosening the grub screw in the stop that's on the drill. More about this later. Now to the setup of the pocket hole jig. This piece of wood needs to be attached to that piece of wood like that. We're going to use our pocket hole jig to drill a hole and enable a screw like this to hold the two pieces of wood together, something like that. Now the jig is here, and that's going to be holding the drill in the correct position. Now, this is how you set it up. You take the jig, take the drill and put the drill through the bush at the back until it comes out the bottom. Now, if you hold this against the side of the wood that you want to drill, you can pull the drill backwards and forwards. Now, the 4mm drill that you have at the end here, that's got a flat bottom to it, and you want that just breaking through the edge of the wood here, but it needs to be in the centre. Now if I hold the drill and push this backwards and forwards, do you see how the depth of that hole varies on the depth of this wood? So you push it backwards and forwards until the end of the drill, which is just breaking this edge here, is in the centre of the wood, which is about there. Now at that point, clamp with your fingers, take a steel rule and measure this distance here. So you're measuring between the edge of the wood, this one here, and that face, the end face here. In this instance it's 13mm. So you need to remember that. That's the first dimension, 13mm. And that's going to be the dimension that we use when we clamp this jig to that wood. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the drill doesn't go any further than the edge of that wood. So holding this still in the same position, you can pull and push the drill like this, and it needs to be around about there. Now you don't want the drill going any further than that, or that will happen and the counterbore will drill straight through to the outside world, which will defeat the object of your screw. So you set the drill so it's just touching the surface there, and that's where this stop comes in. Now the stop needs to be loosened. So let's just check that again. We'll loosen it with the small Allen key we have here. Goes into the grub screw, and then we loosen it. Now we're still in the centre here. It's just touching that outside surface. Hold this together. The stop needs to come down so it just touches the front face of the jig. Move it around so we've got the grub screw pointing upwards. This is still in the centre of the wood. We know that dimension. We can now tighten up the stop. If we can get the Allen key in, there we go. And once that's in, we tighten it up like that, and now we can check the setup. So the 4mm drill is just coming through the centre here, and the stop is in position, and that is how you set this jig up. Now before you start drilling your project, it's always best to check the setup of the pocket hole jig just to make sure everything is correct. Now this is my test. I want to drill a hole going in that direction and connect this piece of wood to another piece of wood. So I've drawn a line down here 13mm from this face. If you remember, that's the dimension that we took when we held the jig in the correct position. Now we've got to hold the jig on the wood round about there, and the way that has been suggested by Axminster and also the jig is to use a clamp like this. Now also purchased from Axminster tools. You can see it's got nice big flat pads on, and that allows that magnet to stick the jig onto the clamp. We have our project clamped to the bench. We're going to want the jig in the centre. Now if you've got a long piece of wood here, I know you're putting multiple holes in, you need to know where you want them, and it's nice to have them regular, at least I think it is. So I would, what I normally do is just mark the centre of the jig, and or where we want the centre of the jig. This piece of wood is 40mm wide, so I'm just going to put in a mark at 20mm, and here's the clamp. Jig sticks to the clamp, and now I'm going to clamp this up with this face of the jig in line with the 13, with the line that's 13 millimeters from this face, and we're also in the center of the piece of wood, and click. So that is now clamped in position and we're ready to drill. Right, it's now time to drill the hole. The drill has a hexagon at the end of the shaft here, which enables it to go into any chuck and fit nicely. It also has these two ridges which allow it to go into the Festool Centratec chuck system. Now that's quite nice, and it just happens that I have one of those drills. So to use this system, you take the chuck off the drill. Thus, you now need the Centratec, the Centratec chuck pushed on. That goes on thus, and then the drill fits in the centre. Here you have to pull the green ring back, and then that fits in as well. And now we're ready to go to drill the hole. Line the drill up with the bush, and now put the drill in before you turn it on. If you don't, then it's liable to, if you get this 4mm drill part into the bush and turn it on, it can rattle around, and you don't want to damage your sharp points on the drill. So it's important to get the drill in the fixture first, and now you can turn it on and start to drill. And that is it. The hole is drilled. Now we can remove the clamp and the jig like that. And let's have a look at the hole that was drilled. And here's the hole drilled. You can see there's a counter bore, so this top diameter is 10mm, which will be the clearance for the head of the screw. In the bottom you can see a 4mm hole, flat bottom where the counter bore is, and that comes out nicely in the centre of the piece of wood on this side. So that is what you produce from the pocket hole jig. Now what we need to do is put the screw in and then screw this to another piece of wood. Let's see if it works. So here we have the screw, and here we have the bit that comes in the kit, and you can see that it fits nicely into the head of the screw. Now one thing I have found with the jig is this is quite long, and when you put a a driver on the end, it's now really long. So I thought, oh well, what I'll do, I'll buy a T20 single bit, which is here, and it fits in the head quite nicely, and then that will go into the driver thus and screw up. However, there is a slight problem that the 10mm clearance for the screw doesn't clear this part of the driver, so you can't screw it in all the way, which is a bit of a pain. So what I did is I went and bought a T20 driver on its own, and then with that I can screw the screw in quite nicely. And if I do need to be further away, then I go resort back to the original driver and the driver handle. One other thing you need to check, and that is the length of the screw, to make sure it doesn't come through the piece of wood that you want to screw into. So if you put the screw into the hole and then push it right down to the bottom, so now the head of the screw is against that counterboard surface at the bottom of this 10mm hole, you can now see that we have a screw sticking out the back. Get a piece of wood that you're going to be screwing it to, and now you can check to see if it's going to pop out the other side, which this one isn't. So that is a good size or a good length of screw to use. Something I have found is problematical is when you first do the screw up. Now it's got a nice sharp end to it, but if you want it flush along this face here, then as you screw this up it's liable to move. And what I find is if you clamp it first, if it's possible, clamp it and then start screwing up, and then that tends to keep it in the right position and it clamps together quite nicely. Now this screw's going in, and there it is now. Now we take out the jig, and hey presto, we have two pieces of wood held together with a pocket hole screw just there.
Pocket hole fixings. Some people love them, some people hate them. I think they do have a place in the workshop, but you need to be aware of what they're good at and also their shortcomings. I'll show you what I've found since I bought the Pocket Hole Jig and been using the fixings. First thing, screw thread depth. If you're using thin material, there's only a few threads engaged into the wood. It's quite easy to strip the thread as you tighten the screw. The next thing is what I call drift. As you tighten the screw, the side containing them will tend to drift in the direction the screws are pointing. It's always best to clamp the joint if possible and then tighten the screws. This will keep the drift down to a minimum. Let's have a look at a little project I did a month or so back. All the fixings are pocket hole screws. The material is 18mm plywood. When I started to make these videos and dived into the world of video editing, my old laptop I've been using in the workshop for some years couldn't cope. It could run the software, but it was so slow. A new digital frame was required, and that's what you can see here. It took up a lot of desk space, so I decided to make a platform for it to sit on just above the two bench power supplies. I had some 18mm plywood. I don't know why they call it 18mm. I've never found any over 17mm thick. Anyway, you can see here the top of the platform upside down on the workbench. One of the sides is about to be screwed into position, and that's going to be using 4 pocket hole screws. As the screws are tightened, they will push in this direction and tend to drift the side out towards the edge of the top. To try to keep the side where I want it, I've clamped the top just here. And I've clamped the timber hard against the side of the top. I want the side to be 5mm in from the edge of the top, so I've placed a 5mm shim just here to stop the side from drifting as the screws are tightened. Look at that, it worked! You can see my 5mm line has not been crossed. In this picture you can see both sides have been screwed into position. Now when you have this situation, be very careful. Don't apply any pressure in this or this direction to the sides. If for instance you push here, this corner will act as a fulcrum and form a lever to the head of the screw. This is a bad thing, as that lever will have a mechanical advantage of over 10 times the force you put into the side. This is why pocket hole fixings seem to pull out so easily if you bend an unsupported side. These triangles are supports for this platform. Each are cut at 90 degrees and have 4 pocket holes waiting for their screws. This is a part of the clamp. It's secured through one of the holes in the workbench. Now you can see the other half of that clamp. It pushes through the V-block and holds everything secure while you tighten the 4 fixings. I place the other supporting triangle here and the platform is finished. There is one other thing I can point out in this picture. Sometimes joints held by pocket hole fixings in thin material seem to wobble. Even when the screws are tightened as tight as you dare, they don't seem to screw up tight. Well, look here. Can you see the light coming through the joint? The joint is held apart by material brought up by the action of the screws biting into and displacing the wood of the underside of the top. You can't tighten the screws anymore or they're going to strip. You either live with the small gap or you take the side off, sand down the high spots and then screw it back in place. In this instance, I left the gap. Here's the platform finished and supporting the computer. It works well. Here's another project I did using pocket hole fixings. It's our bedroom unit, the construction of which is covered in another video. I show this because the wood involved is thicker than the last project. This is 45 by 95mm or 2 by 4 inch timber. The pocket hole screw size is 4 by 35mm. The frames went together quite nicely, but you did have to look out for drift as you tighten the pocket hole screws. If I was going to, say, tighten these 2 screws, then to prevent the timber drifting upwards, I would have to place a clamp onto the vertical frame just here. Then I'd tighten the 2 screws. A possible advantage of using this type of fixing is it does enable you to easily remove timbers at a later date if you want to modify something. Well, that's about all I know of pocket hole fixings. They do work well in the right situations, but they also have their limitations as well. I hope this video has been of help to you and given you an insight into pocket hole fixings. And now with that, this video is at an end. Take care everyone. See you next time.
Could you do something like this? Of course you can.